I'm Jordan McPherson. I'm the Director of Product. I oversee our software here at Park Place. And with me today, I have John Diamond, who goes by JD, and Pete Bartz. So both are from the Solution Architecture Entuity Expertise Center of Excellence. What do we call you guys?
That works.
Okay.
Solution architects.
I always used to play with the idea of how fun of a title could I come up with, right? And then still have a job, I guess, right? Oh, to have that kind of free time. So just from a kind of housekeeping standpoint, so the agenda today is V21. We're going to talk about kind of what's in it, where it came from, kind of an overview. So you're going to have to put up with me on the front end, a little bit heavy. And then we're going to walk through and demo some of the couple of different features here. So JD and Pete will take us through what to expect and how these things should look. And then it's interesting, we always put Q&A on our agenda as a block, but if you've been before or this is your first one, I'll just remind you that the format here is really meant to be interactive, and so put questions in the chat, and we'll work them in if it's going to come up or be answered shortly in the demo, and if it's not, we'll save them till the end. But definitely feel free to put them in the chat as they come in, and we'll work through it. This session will be recorded and posted in a couple of days on the website, so available for download if you have to leave early or anything like that, or you just want to come back and review anything from the tech talk itself, right? But this is meant to be a little bit informal, and not, we're not going to kill you with slides and everything else, right? We really want to have ultimately maybe a moderated discussion, right, with JD and Pete here and kind of work through it. So I think that brings us to 11:03, and I don't want to run out of time on the good stuff, so I will get started here. I did want to kick us off with, and I'm going to use tech that I haven't used before. So let's, I'll beg for a little bit of grace on this, but you should be getting a poll right now. And really what we're asking is, when do you plan to upgrade to version 21, right? Just trying to get an idea here at the front end of what's everybody's plan and schedule, right? So V21's been out for a couple of weeks now, and I'm wondering if we'll have anybody who's already gonna be able to click the already done. I'm excited to see that. So yeah, we'll go ahead and let that run in the background, right? So go ahead and click that and vote if you will. So from a V21 major feature standpoint, really where we were, I would say, kind of headline is we've added functionality in and around IPAM. And so we've seen this as kind of a gap in the Entuity offering in the past, right? We get a lot of questions around IPAM. We also saw that maybe IPAM isn't what it once was, right? So a lot of people wanted automation or DHCP management, right? Our approach is to be to take kind of the IP data we already have and add in monitoring for DHCP, right? And give that visibility. So that's been a big feature for us that's come in, and we're pretty excited. We've also added in some significant VMware enhancements. So if anybody's used the VMware monitoring in the prior versions, it was a little bit limited as far as what came back. It was more focused on the kind of the virtual machines and less on the hosts and clusters and things like that. One of the things that's kind of interesting here is because of kind of the Park Place business, we were able to sit the development team down with a managed services team and actually go through in a couple of different sessions with them and say, okay, with our VMware experts and with our Entuity developers, right? What do you guys use, right? How would this be helpful? How would you drive? What would you need from Entuity to make your job better, faster, easier, right? So really, really an exciting opportunity on that front to kind of go down that path. We also spent a lot of time on what I'll call multi-server, right? So for larger, complicated environments, right? So we've got some new features around making administration easier, and then also some enhancements around how to handle the like topology in a multi-server in an automated fashion, as opposed to the v20 and back. It was manual links and things like that, right? So our goal here really is to empower those NetOps professionals to have an easier time with their job, right? And so from a feature standpoint, that's kind of where we were. We've also added in kind of the last leg of our accessibility updates, right? So we've been working on better high contrast modes and keyboard navigation and things like that, right? So we've wrapped that up kind of as the last phase, right? So that's we're pretty excited about that. I think that's a real testament to the maturity of Entuity software, right? It's easy to skip that stuff when you're kind of a smaller niche product, right? But with our who's using it and things like that, really important to make sure that we are accessible, and we're really proud of that. I will just add one more note on kind of v21 upgrade and features, which is, and we'll put a link in the chat at the end for the migration guide, but just a key to remember that the upgrade to 21 can be taken directly from both version 20 and version 19, right? So as long as you're on one of those, there's no multi-step upgrade process required. So, but definitely dig into the migration guide for a little bit more on there. The last change that I will, and I promise I'll turn it over to these guys to show something more interesting, is around licensing. So we have changed or updated the licensing to be simpler, right? So the associated license is no more. We have our our full license as we've always had, and then we have our basic license. And really that I think brings us to a much better place. We've also changed the way that user-defined polling counts licensing, right? So in version 20, the user-defined polling elements all consumed an associated license, which was not how we wanted that to work, right? So in v21, we have fixed that to be no longer the case, right? So the basic and the full licenses are what there is, which should make it a little bit easier. The high level to think about that is the full license gives you all the metrics and performance and utilization, right? Kind of full Entuity experience. And the basic is really around availability, right? It's more of a, is it up and things like that. You'll notice I don't use the phrase ping only because it's not a ping, right? We are still able to use rich protocols and things like that to pull back metadata and statistics about the device itself, right? But from a monitoring standpoint, availability is really the target there. So, Steve, it's only been available from BNC since Wednesday morning. Interesting. So that's something to look into why that was delayed. Thanks for that feedback. And then I'll just do a poll check and then tell on myself. So it looks like we've got 2 people who are already done. That's exciting. Our early adopters. I don't know if I can actually see who that is. It's anonymous, but mostly looks like 11 for this quarter. That's pretty exciting. And then a couple no plans. Interested to understand what's going on there, right? But I want to rerun this at the end. So I want to see if JD and Pete can be compelling in some of these features to move the needle, right? Maybe some of these this year's become this quarter. So I think with that, first up, I wanted to kick it over to JD. So I had said the IPAM, we did it our way, right? And really focused on monitoring, reporting, and things like that. Can you walk us through kind of how we get the data and the the techniques for what we're doing here?
Absolutely. Good to be with you all. What I'm going to do is show you how the new IPAM module is accessed and how you can take advantage of it. One of the things that Jordan didn't mention, but I will just emphasize it, the IPAM capability is now standard in the base product. There is no additional license. The only licensing implication is when you integrate to DHCP servers, you will be charged a device license for each. But the actual basic IPAM functionality is not covered by any licensing. So everybody who upgrades to version 21 will be able to take advantage of it. Now, to configure it, you go through an administrative screen. So this is available only to the administrators. Down here is the IP address management option. And you're going to see that in this case, we've got a screen that will show the networks and another one, any integrated DHCP servers. This is an optional capability. You don't need to take advantage of it. You can use it just with manual setup, as I've done here. So what I've got is two networks. One of them my home network, and another one is my lab network. I've entered the IP range. I've said that this is a subnet. I've given it a name, and I've set up that I'm going to be performing both ping checking on a periodic basis and checking on via reverse DNS that every IP within the relevant range either has a name and what that name is, or it has not been allocated a name. What this has found is that I currently have 16 active IPs that represents 6% of my total available range. And by the way, that does exclude the .0 and the last IP in the range, which are the reserved addresses. Likewise on here, I've got another range that was set up for a network within my lab. And here I only pulled in the names via reverse DNS, and I also used ARP to pull in the IPs that are known to any routers that have ARP tables that have entries for IPs in that range. Found 2% of my available range being populated. If I were to go and take a look at the home network here, then one of the things that you can see is that you can show the individual IP addresses. These are the IP addresses there. These are the known host names. You can enter comments if you wish. You could right click that and add a comment. And most of these are available. My wife is currently out of the house, and therefore the devices that she has taken with her are no longer responding. And for each individual IP address, you actually got a history of how we discovered it and whether it was responding at any particular given point in time. So that is the main functionality. You've got the options as to how you gather that, whether you're using pinging, whether you're pulling from ARP tables, whether you're pulling in from reverse DNS, and that also gives you the ability to assign a name to each IP that is under your control. But going back here, the important thing when you're looking at a set of networks is whether or not they are running the risk of running out of available IPs. Now I'm going to jump to a different system. On this one, I've got more networks declared, and you'll see here that I've got a whole variety of different size subnets. And I've also got the concept of a parent. There's a parent-child relationship here. When you're adding networks, you can declare whether or not they're a parent or a child of an existing declared parent. So in this case, I've declared a complete IP range for this mythical company. And then for each individual portion of that company, I've declared separate networks. This has come up with a number of devices that are responding, IPs that are available. And you'll notice that there are some thresholds involved here. If you go to the configuration and look at the settings, you're going to see that we've got the concept of a medium and a high level threshold. They default to 50 and 80%. If you go over 50% of your IPs in use, it's going to color that entry on the UI orange. If it goes above high, you can that will color red, as is the case here. So here, for the finance department, they're starting to get a little bit on the short side here. You only need to add a few more staff into that department, or a few more printers and things like that, and you're going to be running the risk of running out. So that's the one where you'd want to apply a more immediate attention. In addition, I've added a DHCP server. We support both Windows Server DHCP and standard Linux DHCP. I've added a Linux server here, the ISC DHCP server, standard Linux package, and it has got 2 scopes declared within it. If I select it, you'll see that these are the 2 scopes. If I wanted to add one of these to the list of networks, and going back here, you'll see, remember, these were the networks that I've already got, all of them in the 10.200 range. If I went here and wanted those any of those scopes in, I could simply select it and add it in. I would give it a name. Let's give it a really imaginative name, XYZ, and add that one in. And then you'll see that from a network standpoint, it's been added without me having to manually define it. And so that's been pulled in from that DHCP server discovery. And then you can set it up for whatever form of additional scanning you might want. Pulling it in from DHCP declares the range. It doesn't count any IPs. The IP counting would be performed by what I've already described, pinging or the other techniques that we've got. And one final thing, as far as other things that this brings to the table, when you cross into the high threshold, the important thing is it's going to raise an event and open up a corresponding incident. So you will get notification that you're starting to get into the danger zone here, running the risk of running out of IPs. When you run out of IPs, then you have to scramble. And the whole idea here is to avoid that scramble. So with that, that's the essence of the new IP management capability that we have in the new version 21. Going to move
Super
on.
exciting.
Yeah, go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that's super exciting, and that we got both Windows and Linux was a big win, right? I know sometimes it can feel like DHCP is just Windows, but I know we've got a lot of Linux customers out there, so that's exciting. And then, JD, while we've got you kind of on the screen share, do you think we can walk through some of the VMware enhancements and what's going on there?
Definitely. Tell you what, I'm going to jump over to this server, and I've got a real live vCenter server under management here. And what we're now presenting above and beyond what we were looking at before. And in fact, let me just jump over to this one. I'm going to go and take a look at it down here. Here we go. So now what we're presenting is the concept of clusters, which are basically all of the hypervisors which are known to that vCenter server, but treated as a single group entity. And we've also got the concept here of data stores. So individual data stores are monitored with their capacity and their current utilization. And of course, yes, you can put a threshold in to alert you when you're getting a bit on the full side. If I were to drill down to an individual hypervisor, before I show you this other stuff, an individual hypervisor, then what you're going to see is that we've added the concept of the host bus adapters. They're now discovered. And we've also got the data stores that are relevant to that hypervisor. But the big, in my opinion, news is that we are now monitoring CPU and memory utilization at the hypervisor level. We didn't used to do that, which means that you're going to be in a position to assess which of your hypervisors are running hot on either CPU and or memory utilization. You may have some that are heavily loaded and some that are ticking over with very little effort being applied, and balancing your fleet of hypervisors would then be a worthy thing to look at. As before, you can drill into an individual virtual machine and see all of those same sort of statistics. But an important point to note on the virtual machine level is that we don't only show you whether a virtual machine is powered up or not. That's a configuration applied from the hypervisor, but also we're doing a heartbeat monitoring on them, which means that if you have a VM that goes belly up, in Windows terms, goes blue screen, then you're going to get a loss of heartbeat event and corresponding incident generated. A very important additional level of monitoring. So you're going to get warned when you've got VMs that are in trouble. So if I were to go back and in fact, let me once more just try take a quick look at the this one, see whether on here. Nope. So in fact, here we go. So if I were to go down to that cluster, then what you're going to see is the hypervisors listed, the aggregate of the total number of processor cores and threads and hosts listed up here, and the memory and CPU, and VMware talk in terms of megahertz for CPU. So the total combined CPU capability, which is why we've got effective CPU and CPU percentage. Effective CPU is quoted in terms of megahertz, and then we work out what that represents in terms of percentage of total here. Likewise with memory, total amount of memory used, and what that represents in terms of percentage of maximum. So we're aggregating the stats from all of your hypervisors to give you this cluster level information. Okay, so that's what we're bringing to the table on VMware enhancements, Jordan.
Well, no, and it's exciting even for the VMs. It looks like we've added some really useful operational metrics, right? I think we've, at least for me, I remember the aha moment of deleting a snapshot and suddenly, you know, my server was performant, whereas before it wasn't, right? And so you get into kind of some fun scenarios there, right? So being able to monitor more of that and view more of it, I think really helps here, right? And then, well, hold on, I almost pulled us down a rabbit hole of the other kind of tech talk, right? Where we envision kind of fun uses for this. Maybe we'll talk about that this summer. So this is really exciting, JD. Thanks for showing this. And sometimes I don't know how you keep all these different environments and who's doing what and where, right? And you almost need an Entuity environment for your Entuity environments. Do we want to kick it over to Pete and walk through some of the multi-server, goodness? Oh, wait, hold on.
Actually, if you want, I can do a little bit of multi-server work. We got some additional multi-server capability in the area of topology management. which has always been a little bit of a challenge when it goes
So
when you go
JD,
multi-server.
let's take a breath. I just I saw a question as I went to kick it to multi-server.
Okay.
So David's asking plans around virtualization reporting, cluster and data store reports. So the report builder today would offer functionality around cluster reports and what he's looking for. Now they wouldn't be necessarily out of the box, but that would be easy enough that maybe we can incorporate that in a future tech talk, or is there a support article we could point David at here?
No support article today, but as with other metrics, these are all in the system and all available to the report builder. So you can put together whatever report, whatever slant you want on it using our report builder. So it's all totally accessible and available for reporting.
But that is good feedback about needing some virtualization reports. So thanks for that, David. All right, so sorry for that, JD. You were about to say that you've got a really cool multi-server topology that you'd like to show us.
Absolutely. Let's go back here. Right, I'm going to go down to this view, and what you're going to see is that I've got my lab network, which is actually all interconnected, but it's showing up as two separate islands of connectivity. If I were to go back into one remote server, because I've got two remote servers connected to a consolidation server, if I look at this remote server, you'll see that it is monitoring two devices referred to as my SANFRAN devices. I've got another one here that you'll see it's got my Chicago and Boston devices. So if I were to draw a map of that, it's got the Boston, which is connected to Chicago, and there's three devices in Chicago. But the truth is, both the Boston and Chicago routers are both individually connected to the SANFRAN router. But because they are monitored on separate remote servers, when I look at that on the consolidation server, it is showing them independent, because the consolidations, in that case, all of the auto discovery that you're familiar with today on previous versions of the product only work within devices or between devices that are being managed on a given remote server. Because SANFRAN and Boston are being managed on different remote servers, their connection is not being auto-discovered. This new capability overcomes that shortcoming. On the consolidation server, if I go back down to administration, down here to topology group management, which is new, it gives me a capability of creating groups of servers that are going to have devices that may well be interconnected. If you're an ordinary enterprise where everything is potentially connected to everything else, you would just create one group and put all of your remote servers in. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to call this one lab, and I'm going to leave it scheduled, which means that every 10 minutes it's going to double check and make sure it's up to date. This is my consolidation server, not managing anything on that, but these two remote servers are managing devices, so I'm going to add them to this new topology group. Okay, we've got a group called lab. I could have applied a description, and these two remote servers are part of it. That in its own right hasn't immediately achieved anything. If I waited 10 minutes, it would, but I don't have 10 minutes to wait. So what I'm going to do is select it and then manually start the discovery. That discovery has already happened, which means that if I go back to that view that I was looking at earlier and look at the map, you will see it now is fully interconnected. These connections between the Boston router and SANFRAN and the Chicago and SANFRAN that weren't there originally have been added automatically by virtue of that topology group. If I go back and check it again, you'll notice that we've also got a couple of extra tabs up here. If I were to go to the links tab, it's going to tell me how that was discovered. These were based upon Cisco's CDP protocol. This topology group management is able to leverage CDP, the industry standard LLDP, and also the industry standard spanning tree management protocols. So any links that can be discovered through either of or any of those techniques are going to be added here. You will notice there are 4 links listed, only 2 displayed. That's because these are bidirectional. So one of these is showing the left to right, the other is showing the right to left. But all of that information is available, and it tells you which servers were involved in that cross-server linkage. So this is the complete list of cross-server topology links that was discovered. It'll update itself automatically every 10 minutes, and it maintains a history of when things were run as well. So that should make your life a lot easier. You'll no longer have to manually add those. You've always been able to, or in recent years, you've been able to add them manually using the manual topology technique, but this automates discovering them automatically.
So JD, what about layer 3 connectivity?
If it's not represented by CDP or LLDP, then that will need to wait for a further enhancement on this. There are other forms of topology connection that aren't yet covered, but this is a good step in that direction, and we hope to expand that in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I think that we would look at those as enhancements as we go this year, right? The
Absolutely.
kind of CDP and LDP was that first first pass to get the most, right? But I could see BGP and things making a lot of sense. So
Definitely.
Pete, do you want to take us through some of the features for admins, right? The features for probably the people on this call, right? How do we make their life better?
Absolutely. Thanks and good day, everybody. So I'm going to talk about 3 of the concepts and some of the changes that we've made now in version 21 around that topic. We'll talk about views, we'll talk about counts and groups, but we're also going to look at one of the features that was actually introduced in version 20 for impersonation. And we'll also look at a new feature, which is something that I really am using right now, and that's the ability to access logs without actually going into the back end. So talking to customers that this has been something that they've been asking for a while, and now it's new in version 21. But let's start with what we're doing on the view management side and sort of that account administrative side. So in today's world, in the version 20 world, previous versions, the way customers would go in and you would build views is you'd go into the view context itself, and you'd go in and you'd create a view. Now, views and content filters, event filters, incident filters, if I built them here, I would build them all as part of this type of a construct. So I'd create a view, I'd create the content filters, and I'd populate it. In a multi-server configuration, then the views would get pushed down. Now, one of the things that's been difficult is what happens in a multi-server configuration when I add a new server. The only way to actually bring that server in sync with all the other servers, especially in the enterprise model, you're going to want to keep all your views the same across all your servers. To do that required some fancy API work in the back end or doing things manually. It was a harder process. So this is an area that we've actually completely turned on its head, I think, to make it easier and make it actually much more manageable. So in addition to views, the way that you would add users, as an example, whether it was a local user or something that was using external authentication, users and groups were something that were done all from the administration side of the house. And you would go into account management, and this would look different. It's now changed in version 21, but you would create users. And then when you propagated those users and those groups over to other servers, you had to do them individually on each server. a multi-server configuration of 2, it's probably not a big deal. But when you get into some of the larger environments, this is something, again, that was either automated via some API scripts or done by hand, which is not necessarily the way you want to go. So in version 21, we've totally changed this. What you'll see from an administration perspective is we've added a new view management section. I'll come back to this in a minute. We've also done some work on the external authentication side. So this UI is different. This is much like what the LDAP integration menu set looks like in previous versions. But you'll see that we've got a new account management page here. I've got a warning, and I'll come back to that in a minute as well. But the big area to focus on then is the multi-server configuration. This is totally changed. And in my case, I've actually got a 3-server configuration. I've got a consolidation server with 2 remote polling servers. Now I've still got access to the function of adding a remote server. I can add that in. This is much like the workflow that you've seen in previous versions. External flow collectors, the ability to leverage incoming connections versus an outbound remote server. Concept of a central server as well. But what you'll see is we've got 2 new menus here, and one of these is called the configuration set. Now, the server configuration set function allows you to create a centralized configuration that can be dynamically pushed out automatically to sets of servers, either all your servers or subsets of servers. The configuration sets are things that you can create. Now, as an alternative to creating views in your context like you used to, you can actually create a configuration set and have it automatically synchronize views, users, and groups to multiple servers. Let's take a look at one that I've actually got in place. I've got one that I just call it synchronize all my details. The idea is I want to synchronize views, users, and groups that are defined here to multiple servers. Now, in an enterprise perspective, you're going to have consolidation server with multiple remote polling servers, and you're going to want all your users and groups and views to be the same across the board. That's what you do normally as a best practice. If you're a service provider, you might want to take a little bit different approach. You actually might want to have views that are different on each polling server because they may represent different customers. So you may not have consistency across every server where every server's got every view, every server's got every user and group, but they may be different. And this method allows you to manage both of them. Let's take a look at this one as an example. I'm just going to edit this, and you can see that I'm automatically synchronizing views, users, and groups. And I've got the ability now to manage my views and manage my users, and then from here, manage the groups. So instead of creating a view on the consolidation server via kind of the traditional approach, I'm going to go in here and manage views. I'm going to create a top level view. I'm going to just randomly call this example. If I can spell, there we go. I could add in and create a content filter. I could create event filters, incident filters. Again, you see these as kind of a different UI a bit. And I can select that here. You can see that I've created it. And I'm actually setting up synchronization. So what this is going to do is, as I create this view, I'm automatically synchronizing across multiple servers. So this is similar to creating a view the old way. But one of the benefits of this one is if I look at this and I go back to the definition, I have the opportunity to assign servers. So I can selectively add just a subset. I can add my consolidation server and one of my remote polling servers to this set. So I'm not actually pushing the views out to every one of the servers that I've got in my environment. So this actually provides an opportunity for you to create, traditionally in an enterprise approach, you'll have one profile. that's actually synchronizing across all of your systems. But from an MSP perspective, you could have a profile per customer and have it synchronized just to the server, the remote polling server that it needs to. And you can control this all from the consolidation server. Now, the other advantage of this is if you add another server. So, traditionally, if I had a brand new server into the environment, I now have to run through some hoops in order to get all the views and all the groups populated there. It's doable, but it's harder. This way, you'd actually add the server into your multi-server configuration as a remote, and then you modify your profile to include that brand new server. Click the server, hit done, it'll automatically resynchronize everything from the consolidation server on out. So much easier, much cleaner, a really good way to actually manage that multi-server configuration from here. Let's look at it a little bit differently. I've got a lot of cases where we'll work with a customer during a proof of concept, and during that process, we actually build up configurations of views. We set up multiple users. We might set up a external authentication as well. And when they go to production, they may want to take that server as sort of a basis for their production environment. There's ways to do that. Again, we've done that traditionally. But from this standpoint, one of the things that's really easy now is I added in my POC server right here as a remote, so I can see it. But what I'm also able to do now is from the multi-server configuration here is take a look at my configuration set, and I've got a configuration set that's going to import from my POC server all the views, users, and groups and put it into a profile right here. So I don't have to manually build it. I'm actually importing it from one server into another. And it's really easy to do. I'm going to use this one as an example. Let's take a look at that external server. This is 192.168.12.5. This is just a remote that I used in my POC, and you can see that I've got a large number of views. So creating these by hand is a bit of a pain. I've also got a few users that you'd see in here as well. Since I've got this set up, I've actually got this set up where I can create it. I'm actually going to, let's delete this and create a brand new one here. I'm going to delete this one and just create one so you can see what it looks like. Let's create, we'll just call this one import. I don't need to have it synchronize anything right now. I'm just going to use this as an import base. So I've created the import. Now I'm actually going to pull in from that remote server. And to do that, I'm going to select this, select the dashlet menu, and I'm going to go down to import current config. Now it's going to ask me which server I want to import from, and this is my POC server right here. I'm going to hit done. This is going to replace any definition that's in this profile with what that one is, but it's empty right now, so I'm just going to hit yes. This is synchronizing that configuration right now. So let's go in and take a look at it. If I went and looked at this and managed the views, you'll now see all of the views that match what this server had as a standard. Now, what do I do with that? What you would leverage this for is, you could make modifications to the views here. Now, if I make modifications to this view, because I'm not synchronizing it with anything, this is just a local modification. So I could modify it, or I could just turn this around and actually use it as a basis to synchronize with. So I could go into here, I could actually assign servers, and I could actually push that synchronization out. Now, what's interesting is 2 of my servers are under control already for some other synchronization set. So it's using the profile synchronize my details. So if I wanted to do this, I'd probably want to remove them from this set. So I'm not only synchronizing from one or the other. This is a way to actually take an external server that you've built and pull that configuration in, and then use that as a seed to push configuration consistently out into all of the environment. Again, it covers all the users.
This is
yeah. Go ahead.
This is great, right? I got like all kinds of really good ideas maybe for a follow-on tech talk to dig into different use cases for maybe managed service providers or enterprises, right? You think you could take us through the logs, right? I think that's really exciting. We did get a question while you're clicking through that. Gary asked, what about event projects? And Gary, I asked the same thing, right? Because if you've done it once, you've done it what feels like too many times, right?
Right.
And so it is on the roadmap, as it were. But it is it did not make the initial release for the multi-server administration piece, right? So, but I'm definitely excited for that one when it comes. And then Stuart, I did get your feedback around the processes, and that is being evaluated. But Pete, yeah, go ahead and show us the logs so that we can kind of take a look at that. This was probably one of my favorite features for 21.
Yeah, this is really this is a huge administrative benefit. So many customers where you've got one group that's got access to Entuity and another group that's got access to the system. Makes it hard to get log files viewed and downloaded. So let's take a look at that. So I've created, and actually you can, if you look at the release notes, there'll be a link on how to actually set this up. But in my environment, I've actually got the multi-server set up, and I'm going to go into the system information side. I'm going to go into this menu, and what you'll see now is a new menu called Show Log Files. Now from here, whether I'm a single server, whether I'm a multi-server configuration, I can go in and define the log files that are in the Entuity log directory that I want to be able to make visible. So I don't have to make everything visible. You can see here, multi-server, I've got access to multiple servers here. On this server, I've actually made it so I can actually access every log file. So if I wanted to, download a log file, DS kernel as an example, I can just click on download. It's going to download into my directory here. Go into my downloads. So very quick way to get access to the logs. If I take a look at a different server as an example, you'll see I'm limiting only access to the system control log. Same type of mechanics to be able to download it. Now those are all controlled, and you'll see this in the online documentation by an entry in entuity.cfg. So there's a new entry called log files, and this gives you the ability to name the log files that you want to be able to leverage. Comma separated. You can use if you want things like the Tomcat logs, you can do Tomcat star, and it'll pick up all the different variants of Tomcat. So you can use some regular expression, at least with a star in there. That's all explained in the Help Center. But it's configured here. And one thing to note here as well, since you're making the change in entuity.cfg, you'll need to make the change. You'll need to stop the Entuity service and then restart it in order for it to take hold. But
and I can't believe you're not showing proliferate, right? That's always my, that's always the one, right? You've got a device that doesn't want to add and then proliferate, right? So that's
proliferate's one of the big ones. So and I've got it right here.
Oh, on the other one. All right.
Yeah.
Good.
So again, it's just the idea that you can actually control which ones you want to see. And you're right. There's a small subset that are really the ones that you look at more regularly.
No, totally.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, so we've got all these great multi-views and users. That's a good question from Gary, right? So can we pull in logs that are written outside of the default Entuity location?
Currently not. They're focused on just the actual log files that are in the Entuity log directories.
Yeah, so this is limited to the Entuity logs, right? Not
correct.
We can't pull in anything else today. Yeah.
Yep.
So we've got all these great multi-servers, right? The question I always get is, how do we validate, right, that something looks correct or whatever else, right? Sometimes we've done the dashboard configs and set up views and then, those darn users, right? They tell us it doesn't look right. And so that is the best softball I can toss up for you when it comes to impersonate.
That sounds good. And you're right. We run into this all the time. It's like, you set up a user, they log in, they can't see what they're supposed to see. So something's not set up correctly or they're doing something incorrectly. And how do you troubleshoot that other than walking down to their desk or across the country to some other location to actually see what they're looking at? So
or worse, before you send it to your boss, right? You want to make sure that it looks right.
that is exactly right. And you don't want to ask your boss's password to be able to emulate what they're going to see. So in version 20, we actually introduced the feature of impersonation. So in version 21, the impersonation is in a little bit different location. But if you look at as an admin, and I go down, I've got the opportunity here to impersonate a user. So I'm going to impersonate JD. JD, is it okay if I impersonate you? So I'm looking at our demo system that JD and I both work on. I'm going to go down to impersonate, and I want to troubleshoot with JD some of the things that he's not seeing, maybe dashboards, maybe views, you name it, or maybe tools. Let's go down here. I'm going to go down and find JD's user. I'm going to hit done. I'm going to navigate to his homepage. And you can see here that I'm logged in as my user and I'm impersonating JD right here. So this is a really, really quick way. I've got a number of customers that even in version 20 are leveraging this a lot. And I think this is really, really helpful. Coming from the customer side back when Entuity was version 3, I wish I had this back then. So this is pretty cool stuff. But I can navigate just like that user. Go ahead.
Yeah, the only limitation on that is that you're still using the Minnesota accent rather than the British accent.
Darn it. I'll work on that. So let's go and I can end the impersonation, and I'm back to just looking at Entuity like myself. Jordan, anything else that I missed on this one?
You know what it is? It's a boring demo, but it should be, right? It works exactly like you'd expect. There's not a lot of explanation needed, right? Yep. We did get a question from Clayton just now, kind of as we're at the end. This is a good time for any other open questions, right? But he's asking, can we pull, and I'm assuming, Clayton, you mean access points that are being monitored via controller, right? So they would be kind of those, they would hang off the controller from an Entuity perspective. Can we pull those into a topology map is what he's asking today. I think I know the answer, but I'll defer to you guys.
Yeah, today they're not able to be put on the topology map. Only devices can be put on, and those are subcomponents of a device. They are not considered devices themselves. So today the answer is no, they can't be actually put onto one of our topology maps.
You can run the connectivity report though. So if you're trying to identify where APs are connected into the environment, the connectivity report will give you switch and port.
Absolutely.
All right. So we'll just, if there's any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to review, right? So earlier we had, somewhere under 30% that was saying, this quarter, this month, maybe already done for V21. So that's great. And then another almost 40% for this year, and then 30% that no plan. So I'm going to relaunch a new version of the poll, right? So after that great demo, if there's any new feelings, that would be great to see, and that kind of thing. I'm going to put in the chat as kind of for everybody here, a link to the release notes, a link to the migration guide. So Richard asks about the report builder. I don't think there was anything significant or to that effect with the report builder. But I'm not sure if there was anything minor from a reporting change as far as any new reports or anything in V21. I haven't looked that closely. Is there anything, Richard, maybe that you're looking for? Oh, this is a good question from Mark. So when a monitored device is removed from Entuity, either manually or via API, is the affiliated IPAM entry also removed?
The answer is no on that one, because it would be considered, if that were a DHCP server, then it would need to be separately instantiated for ordinary monitoring and as a DHCP server. If it's just an ordinary non-DHCP server, then if it is removed from the network and stops responding, for example, to a ping, then the next time you get a ping scan, it won't be counted. And it'll be indicated as no longer being active. So from that standpoint, there'll be a relationship, but that's just by virtue of the fact that it's no longer responding.
Wait a minute. This is my favorite. Richard's happy that there's no major changes. So that's it's always a winner when not building a feature was the right answer. So thanks for that. Is it possible to get a flow from a server? I'm not sure I totally understand the question here. Are we saying we want to export flow from a server, from the server interface into Entuity? And I'm not sure. And if I read that wrong, go ahead and clarify, right? But that I'm not familiar with. I mean, obviously, we could, from the network side, export that port as a flow and send it over. And it would stand to reason that if we had the server under management and we're able to export flow from the server through some method, right, that we would be able to handle that from Entuity, right? But
Yeah,
that
so
would
if
be,
you've
I
got,
think, a little bit more dependent on the server. But go ahead,
if you've
please.
got flow monitoring happening on network devices and you are observing traffic to and from an application server, then you can display that within our dashboards, within our reports, and there are a set of API calls that allow you to extract that flow information for use in third-party products. So does that answer the question?
Well, we do have another question around IPAM. So the question is, can we get the DHCP ranges from a router or a switch that's managed by Entuity and has the role of a DHCP server?
The closest you can get there is that for every layer 3 port on a device, on a router, or a device with routing capability, then we will know its network address and its subnet mask. So we would be able to identify all of the subnets that it is routed to. But as far as inbuilt DHCP capability, off the shelf, no, there isn't. However, if you can get that information, then we have a way of importing from a CSV file a list of networks. So that was one thing I didn't show you. The IPAM user interface has an option there to import network definitions rather than typing them in manually. And in fact, there's online help. You just hit the question mark icon in the UI, and it gives you the online help as to the format of that CSV file. So you would be able to implement that. You just have to obtain that list of ranges and format it up into a CSV file and then import it.
And then Mark has asked a question around the API and kind of what's doing there, right? So they're on version 19 and looking to upgrade to v21 and understanding. What I would say is yes, there has been changes, and the best answer I have is I just put a link in the chat here. This is actually from the support site and covers the difference from the Entuity API from v19 versus v21, right? So there's two separate articles there about the different versions.
We haven't removed any functionality. All we've done is added additional functionality for new features. For example, IPAM has associated API functionality that would not have been relevant before version 21.
But always good to review the docs just to make sure that
Absolutely
we didn't fix a bug that you're taking advantage of, right? I always hate when my feature turns out to be a bug. So yeah, good question though. And then let's just take a look at that poll result. So, the exciting news is we've got a lot more people who are gonna look like they've pushed up, right? So we've got 16% saying this month and 34% saying this quarter, right? So that's a big shift. So that's exciting. What I've been asked to remind everybody is if you have any questions about upgrading or concerns about server sizing or the steps, right? Always feel free to contact support with a ticket. And if you need more than that kind of support, we do have training and or premium support, right? So you can get somebody from Pete and JD's team to come and be your Entuity admin for a little while, right? So I understand that these things can be tough to keep up with and a lot to consider, and we really rely on these systems. So if that is something that you need, your account managers are there, and I think there's a updated language about that on our website now, right? So check that out, and but get started with the migration guide and reach out to support if you do have questions from there, and really look forward to the next Tech Talks where we dig into the how do we solve some use cases with some of these features, right? I'm imagining kind of some of those now, right? So I guess with my final sign off, I'll say if you do have anything that you think would be of interest or kind of neat to see, right? We've done some deep dives into user-defined polling in the past and how to kind of use that the best way you can, EMS actions, integrations, things like that, right? So we're definitely trying to expand the conversation, and so if there's something that you think might be interesting, please reach out. 18 to 21, Nishant, would not be supported. We support from 19 and 20, right? So you would have to do, but if they were on the latest patch of 18, they could go to 20. Is that correct, guys?
That's correct. Yep. And then from 20 naturally,
and then from there you go 20 to, yeah.
It's really a case that we have not done full QA validation on going up from anything earlier than 19. So we cannot put our hand on our heart and say, yes, it's been tested.
Great. Well, with that, I want to thank everybody for hanging in there with us. That was definitely a little more dense than they normally are, but really, really good and helpful information from Pete and John. So thanks, guys, for being here with me, and thanks everybody for attending and listening. And we'll see you real soon with the next topic.